The world's solar and wind investments have reached a tipping point in electricity supply, and China is leading the way. Hello, I'm Anand Naidu, and this is The Heat. This year is expected to be a turning point in the world's dependence on coal and gas. Renewable energy is expected to shrink fossil fuels' reigning share of the global electricity market for the first time. That's according to Ember, a leading energy think tank. China is considered a global leader in clean energy with the manufacturing and installation of solar panels and wind turbines, not to mention its advancements in electric vehicles and new technologies. For more on the global energy transition, let's bring in our panel. Joining us from Delaware is Saleem Ali. He's a Blue and Gold Distinguished Professor of Energy and the Environment at the University of Delaware. Also with us from Virginia, Michael Shank is Director of Engagement with Carbon Neutral Cities Alliance and an Adjunct Professor in Sustainable Development at New York University. From Seattle, Yixing is the former Research Director at Breakthrough Energy, and Changhua Wu is the China Director for the Office of Jeremy Rifkin. She joins us from Shanghai in China. Thank you, everyone, for being with us. Changhua Wu, let me start with you. We look at this Ember report that just came out. It's a good news report in many respects. It tells us that renewable energy sources will make further gains this year in taking away market share from fossil fuel energy sources. And it's part of this decade-long effort that's been started to reduce the role of fossil fuels to zero in at least 3 dozen developing countries. So if this remains on track, how significant will it be for the fight against climate change?
Thank you, Anand, for having me on the program again. This is a fascinating progress. As we learned, the data evidence shows that finally we reached a sort of a tipping point, which are urgently needed in order to reduce emissions and fight climate change. As the report said, China definitely is leading the way. And if you look at the installations last year, China installed the solar energy literally equal to the total installations in the US just through 1 year. And in the meantime, China's industrial capability has been dramatically reducing the cost of solar energy and wind energy and supporting other countries actually to achieve the tipping point there as well. As we all know, last year at the COP28 in Dubai, global community has agreed to achieve tripling renewable energy by the end of this decade. China is already leading the way, and hopefully somehow that trend will continue to hold rather than be delayed by other destructive geopolitical reasons there. So, overall, I think particularly in we call it tipping point, if you look at the climate disaster, the hazards, we really need this called a positive news. I call it positive tipping point.
Yeah, what about the goals that China has set for itself, Changhua Wu? Sometimes it's referred to as the 30-60 decarbonization goals, peaking emissions by 2030 and then reaching neutrality by 2060. Is that still on track?
Absolutely. Actually, there's another report and by Carbon Brief that China probably has already peaked its emission by the end of last year. China could not possibly achieve this sort of peaking goal at least 5 years or 6 years ahead of the schedule by 2030 without really the renewable energy leapfrogging. And so in a nutshell, we started to see the pieces of the puzzle coming together, really driving towards decarbonization, at least starting with the energy sector.
Yixing, of course, this Ember report was looking at the global energy picture and the transition away from fossil fuels to renewable energy. But if we look at China, China has more than 80% of the world's solar manufacturing capacity. It's also installed half the world's solar panels and 60% of wind turbines, and is by far the world's biggest producer now of green technology. So how key have China's contributions been to this global effort?
Yeah, so China's contribution to the global renewable energy sector, particularly in solar and wind energy, are profoundly significant. Right? China's production capacity has helped driving down the cost of solar panels by about 90% in the last 10 years through economics of scale, making solar energy more affordable globally. And by installing half of the world's solar panels and 60% of the world's wind turbines, China has not only demonstrated its commitment to renewable energy, but also has become a crucial player in the global energy transition and in the fight against the climate change. So China's renewable energy production is vital for reducing global greenhouse gas emissions. By heavily investing in and deploying renewable energy, China helped offset a big portion of its own environmental impacts. And that really supports the global climate change mitigation efforts. And also China's dominance in renewable energy supply chain, from raw materials to finished products, has streamlined the whole production process. And this vertical integration ensures a steady supply of necessary components at a very reasonable price, further stabilizing the global market. So in short, this contribution is quite significant.
Michael Shank, what are your thoughts on this Ember report? Are you surprised in any way by these findings, given that the fossil fuel industry is a very powerful industry? It knows how to fight back when it sees its share of the market diminishing.
Well, as you've noted, we need good news. We have good news. This report is good news. To see China's leadership in solar and wind over the past few years, as fellow panelists have noted, I don't need to reiterate that incredible leadership that other countries should follow. But I think where the opportunity lies for countries like China that are leading in wind and solar in ways that you've mentioned, that the panelists have mentioned, when we look at other countries, high, middle, low-income countries that are scaling up renewables, take Uruguay, Lithuania, Namibia, Jordan, Palestine, Chile. These are some of the countries that in the last 5 years have really scaled up renewables. Why are they scaling up? Well, take Uruguay's case study, for example. Drought after drought after drought motivated the country to pivot off reliance on hydroelectric because of the droughts and scale up wind energy 34% over the last 5 years. Namibia similarly saw energy prices skyrocketing as they were importing electricity from places like South Africa and decided to invest in solar, and now are heavily reliant on solar for their electricity mix and grid. And these countries are doing so for energy security reasons. And so the real opportunity lies in helping countries like the Namibias, the Lithuanias, the Uruguays, the Jordans become energy secure. Now, there's another opportunity here to help these countries be climate secure so that when the climate impacts are hitting these countries in ways that we're already seeing, they don't have to be displaced. They don't have to flee. They don't have to become climate refugees. So both in building energy security for these countries as well as climate security so that they're resilient in the face of current and upcoming shocks, I think is the work ahead.
Saleem Ali, one of the authors of that Ember report, Dave Jones, he said, and I'm quoting him here directly, he said, China's need to find new export markets is a tremendous opportunity for countries around the world to take advantage of how low-cost, competitive and available solar is compared to other generation sources. Unquote. Now, of course, there is the question of cost, but, costs are falling because of scale. How big a market is this for China? I mean, what kind of potential is there, especially in the developing world?
Well, it's an enormous market, and certainly with the Belt and Road Initiative, this can be a signature way in which China can make that whole effort much greener. But also, we do need to recognize that there are potential bottlenecks ahead where China would also help play a role, and that's with the materials which we need for upscaling this beyond the current 30%. And so, as you know, there are massive needs for raw materials, particularly for solar. You've got a range of infrastructure needs and some very critical raw materials, and China has dominated in those as well. So what I'm hoping is that this will also be a way by which there is a recognition for global cooperation over mineral supply chains for the green energy transition. And the good news there is that just last month, the United Nations Secretary General announced that there will be a new panel on critical energy transition minerals, and China and the United States are both country members of that panel.
Right. And Saleem, no doubt, wind and solar will play a big role in this transition away from fossil fuels. But what kind of a role will there be for nuclear energy?
Well, one of the achievements I feel of COP28 that is often not recognized is that there was a commitment made by several countries to invest in baseload power, and nuclear is very much part of that. As you know, for solar and wind, they do not provide baseload power without massive investment in energy storage. And so either you have to invest in other sources of baseload power like nuclear or other sources which have that capacity that are often fossil fuels, which you don't want, or you have to build massive storage capacity. So there was a commitment in COP28 to triple nuclear power by 2050, which included, again, countries like the United States, the United Kingdom, France, and many countries cooperating with countries like China as well in that regard. So nuclear does have a role to play in terms of baseload power delivery. It's not a panacea, but it's part of the solution.
And Changhua, we're looking at China's use of nuclear-powered energy. China has 56 nuclear reactors. Those are reactors that are already in operation, and another 27 nuclear reactors under construction. That's according to the World Nuclear Organization. The Economist says that China is building nuclear reactors faster than any other country. So looking at the bigger picture for China, looking at its broader goals of this shift away from fossil fuels, how does nuclear energy fit into that?
As Professor Ali just mentioned, when China installs, dramatic amounts of solar and wind energies, we definitely need a solid, baseload capacity. Rather than rely on coal, so nuclear happens to be a preferred choice, because otherwise nuclear is a non-fossil fuel, at least by definition. Otherwise, we'll have to rely on coal or natural gas. So that's one particular reason. Secondly, I think if you look at the nuclear technology itself, and they've been progressing very fast as well. So today, when we talk about the nuclear power technology, it's not the old sort of previous generations. So we started to see a more diverse options of a new generation of nuclear technologies that we're all aware of the potential environmental ecological consequences of safety potential safety risk of nuclear energy. But somehow, with the more progressed improvement of nuclear technology, we'll be able to manage those potential negative consequences in a much better, more effective way.
Yixing, I mean, if we look at the path to net zero emissions, there are plenty of hurdles along the way. One of those hurdles, of course, is coal. For the power sector to reach net zero emissions by 2040, coal power must be phased out globally, and unabated gas would have to provide only 0.3% of global electricity. I mean, is that a realistic goal, given that so many countries still, including China, still depend on coal as a source of energy?
Yeah. Achieving net zero emission in power sector by 2040 is an ambitious and a challenging goal. But I believe it is a realistic goal because of the following reasons. The first one is the significant advances in renewable energy technologies such as wind and solar are making these are becoming cheaper and very efficient now. So the decreasing cost of renewables driven by the technical improvements and the economics of scale enhance this feasibility of transition away from coal. So that's number one. Second is that now the energy storage cost is also declining quite fast. As we know, renewables are intermittent, and energy storage is critical to stabilize the electric grid as we have more and more wind and solar, and its cost is also declining fast. The third one is that other emerging technologies such as carbon capture, nuclear fusion are currently being developed. Of course, some of these emerging technologies are still risky. We are not sure whether they are going to work, but I'm sure some of them will work. So we still have some time to wait for these emerging technologies to become mature so that they can help us achieve this ambitious goal. And the last reason I feel confident is that there are policies which are strong and consistent government policies. They are subsidizing renewables. They are helping. They are making regulations to phase out coal and to promote clean energy. So all these policies are also going to help achieving this ambitious goal.
Right, that's an important point you raised there, Yixing, especially that on energy storage. As you point out, wind and solar is intermittent, so we would need energy storage. What kind of technology is there right now for this?
For example, currently, lithium-ion are the most mature energy storage technology.
And is it widely available? Oh, we've lost Yixing. Well, let's move on. Michael Shank, there was an interview done on CGTN by the IMF Managing Director, Kristalina Georgieva, in which she acknowledged China's role in the green energy sector, and she praised the efforts that were being made by delegates at the COP28 meeting, which took place in Dubai. Let's listen to some of what the IMF Managing Director had to say.
It has renewed that sense of unity, that countries can come together, that instead of pointing fingers at each other, we can hold hands, because we are in this together, and only together we can reverse course. China has taken very seriously its obligations to advance technology in some areas like solar panels, renewable energy overall, electric vehicles. China is now a leader.
So, Michael, she made the point there several times that countries have to come together. I mean, everyone has to pull in the same direction in trying to win this battle against climate change. How big a challenge is that right now? As we heard earlier on in the show, geopolitics gets in the way here as well.
Yes, I appreciate her optimism. We need more of it. I think if we embed some of our climate policy in our foreign policy so that our aid and international development and international assistance is oriented around helping communities and countries be more resilient, as I mentioned earlier, climate secure, and that becomes our foreign policy, helping communities and countries all around the world be both energy secure and climate secure for the face of climate impacts, which are devastating and displacing communities everywhere. So I appreciate that optimism. We certainly need more of it. And in a competitive free market, China's leadership in wind and solar does beckon other countries to lead too. Because currently, as all of you have noted, China is outpacing other countries. So in a marketplace of diplomacy, I think there is a real opportunity to come together and outpace each other. But we definitely need more of the optimism that she mentioned.
Saleem, I want to get back to that point I was talking to Yixing about, and that is the storage of energy, storage of electricity and things like that, and the technology that exists. He was pointing out that lithium technology does exist right now, but is that widely available? Is it affordable?
Yes, the lithium-ion battery is the most widely used storage infrastructure in terms of batteries, and it's very versatile. It can be used in your tablets and phones, and it can also be used in large-scale storage. It can be used in EVs. However, there are many new technologies, flow batteries, vanadium, particularly batteries, might be useful for smart grids. And then there's another neglected aspect of storage in certain locations, which we should consider, and that's pumped hydro. Because if you can pump water into a reservoir at a certain height, when you have the energy available, it acts like a battery, because then you can run it down a turbine. And that is actually one of the areas that is being considered as the cleanest form of storage, where that kind of landscape is available. So pumped hydro would be another one to consider. But in terms of battery technologies, it's one of the biggest growth areas for research and innovation.
Right, I want to get back to COP28, the meeting that took place in Dubai. I mean, that meeting marked what they call the beginning of the end for fossil fuels. It urged governments to speed up this transition to fossil fuels. And I mean, are we getting something of a sharp reminder of what climate change is doing right now? I mean, we look at For instance, this month, the month of May, where we've seen record-breaking temperatures, we've seen that in India, we've seen that in Pakistan. Is that message getting through?
Yes, I think the message is getting through, but there is also a realization increasingly that we have crossed some of those tipping points and we will have to adapt. So, of course, mitigation is important so things don't get any worse. But there's no doubt that, for example, with cities, there is a massive effort to try and develop infrastructure, subterranean infrastructure, people living underground as much as possible to avoid the heat and have low energy cooling. There are many cities which have now established offices of chief heat officer. The Rockefeller Foundation is supporting several cities to have chief heat officers to manage this problem. So there will be similarly issues around adaptation and sea level rise in coastal cities and building infrastructure. So now I think there is much more willingness to engage in adaptation at the same time as mitigation.
Changhua, well, we often talk about tipping points and points of no return in this battle against climate change. Where are we now in terms of, the goals that were set initially at the Paris meeting, at the Paris Accords?
We have not been doing a very good job overall, even though there are exciting news as we're talking about here today in terms of clean energy transition. But if you look at the climate hazards, if you look at the heat waves, extreme weather events, and we're definitely on the path that's sort of so dangerous actually to all lives actually on this planet there. On the positive side, I think just following up what Professor Ali just said, so at the UN, at a global level, so back in 2023, the UN officially launched something called Early Warning for All initiative, literally committing 5 years between 2023 and 2027 to make sure we're going to have every individual on this planet should be covered by early warning systems there. I think that tells very sort of interesting point in terms of a sense of urgency. We cannot wait anymore. We have to invest in early warning systems because we are living in disasters there. Now, the second point, actually, I think also at the UN level, we also recognize, for instance, glaciers melting is really devastating at this moment. So next year is now designated as the International Year of Glaciers Preservation there. So there are things like that actually, on the ground and being deployed in different parts of the world, really enhancing the sense of urgency of climate resilience and adaptation there. Now, on the mitigation side, as we're talking about here today, I think there are fascinating news, but in the meantime, we all know, particularly demonstrated by China, we have the capability, technology, industrial capability to move much, much faster in terms of clean energy transition, but somehow the progress we made so far it's not really adequately in terms of addressing this climate crisis there. That's where I think the global community needs to pay more attention to and figure out how to break the deadlock.
Michael, it seems we've reached something of a critical point right now in this battle against climate change. I mean, decisions have been made, policies have been formulated, but now they will have to be implemented. So we have COP29, which is coming up in Azerbaijan. What are your expectations?
Well, I hope everyone attends. There's a lot of talk about people not attending because it's in an oil-rich, oil-producing country, Azerbaijan. We heard the same with the UAE, people refusing to attend because of oil's presence. The problem I have with that a lot of people refusing to attend were from the US, which is the top producer of oil and gas. And so we really don't have time for finger pointing. We need everyone at the table. In talks, sure, we need to be free of lobbyist influence, but we do need everyone there. We need all foundations there, all actors there. Our cities at the Carbon Neutral Cities Alliance will be there because we are scaling up in areas already mentioned here with chief heat officers, which is new for a lot of our cities to employ chief heat officers. Where the exciting work is happening is in the scale up of the workforce. We talked about training up the people to electrify the buildings, to decarbonize the buildings. We can't move fast enough because we often don't have enough contractors to do the work. If New York City wanted to electrify its buildings overnight, it couldn't because we often don't have either the equipment, the appliances, or the contractors to do it. So there's a lot of excitement happening across our cities, both on mitigation and on the adaptation side. And we're seeing incredible growth in workforce. So I think the opportunity going into both this COP and next year's COP is to make sure all the actors are at the table in multi-level partnership. The cities are there, the states are there, the national governments are there. No one is left behind out of some kind of protest, because we need everyone at the table problem solving together on this.
Yixing Xu, looking again at China, in 2023, the clean energy sector in China accounted for 40% of China's GDP growth. A lot of that is because of China's shift to electric vehicles. I mean, how has China's investment in the EV industry contributed to that 40% that we are talking about?
Yeah, so China's significant investment in clean energy sector, particularly in electric vehicles, has played a very crucial role in its economic growth. So the EV industry has become a major source of innovation and high-tech employment, research and development in EV technologies, battery efficiencies, and even autonomous driving systems such as AI have created new jobs and spurred advances in other sectors. And China's policies has boosted domestic demand for EVs. For example, last year, the new electric cars reached 8.1 million last year in 2023, increasing by about 35% relative to 2022. This strong domestic market has provided a solid foundation for economic growth and has helped local companies, including BYD, to scale up productions and reduce costs. And similarly, this number in the United States is just 1.2 million. So you can see how big of a portion the EV plays in China's economy.
Right, Saleem, I've just got about a minute left, but if we look at the what's going on in the United States, I mean, this is a very political issue here. It's divided the country in many respects. But the US did announce a $6 billion effort that's funding to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, building clean factories, and trying to retrofit older factories. What do you make of that effort?
Yes, I think overall in the last 4 years, we've seen a lot of positive movement in terms of infrastructure investment. Of course, we have an election year coming up, and this is a fault line issue between the parties. I would hope that the green jobs narrative is one which can be bipartisan and it can sell across the aisle. And so that's what the US needs to focus on.
Okay, and that is where we have to leave it. That's all we have time for. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C. Thanks to all of you for being with us.